Education in Iran. Education in Iran is centralized and divided into K-12 education plus higher education. Elementary and secondary education is supervised by the Ministry of Education, and higher education is under supervision of Ministry of Science, Research and Technology, and Ministry of Health and Medical Education medical fields. As of 2016, 86% of the Iranian adult population are literate. This rate increases to 97% among young adults aged between 15 and 24 without any gender discrepancy. By 2007, Iran had a student-to-workforce population ratio of 10.2%, standing among the countries with highest ratio in the world. Primary school Dabestân Dabirestân starts at the age of 6 for a duration of 6 years. Junior high school Dabirestân Dabirestân, also known as middle school first, includes 3 years of Dabirestân from the 7th to the 9th grade. Senior high school Dabirestân Dabirestân, including the last 3 years, is not mandatory. The student at this level can choose to study its theoretical, vocational/technical or manual fields, each program with its own specialties, and in the end of it, students are given high school diploma. The requirement to enter into higher education is to have a high school diploma and passing the National University Entrance Examination, Iranian University Entrance Exam Konkur KH and KHWR, which is similar to the French baccalauréat exam for most of universities and fields of study. Universities, institutes of technology, medical schools, and community colleges provide the higher education. Higher education is sanctioned by different levels of diplomas. Fog-e diplom or Kardani after 2 years of higher education. Karshanasi, also known under the name license, is delivered after 4 years of higher education bachelor's degree. Karshanasi Arshad is delivered after 2 more years of study master's degree, after which another exam allows the candidate to pursue a doctoral program PhD. History of education in Iran. Pre-Islamic Iran. Scholars have discovered documents from around 550 BC relating to an emphasis on education in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran. The documents urged people to gain knowledge in order to better understand God and to live a life of prosperity. Religious schools were set up in limited areas to serve the government. Although the majority of the problems focused on religious studies, there were also lessons regarding administration, politics, technical skills, military, sports, and arts. The first higher education organization, Gundashapur or Jandashapur, which still exists, was formed during the Sassanid period, around the 3rd century. Safavid dynasty. This dynasty marks the first of modern education in Iran. There was a mixed emphasis on Islamic values and scientific advancements. Muzaffari era. Formed in 1898, the Educational Committee Anjuman-i-Ma'arif was the first organized program to promote educational reform not funded by the state. The committee was composed of members of foreign services, ulama, wealthy merchants, physicians, and other prominent people. The conflicting interests of people involved led to difficulties enacting. However, they did succeed in the opening of many new primary and secondary educational schools. It also created a public library, offered adult classes, published an official newspaper Roznama-i-Ma'arif, and established a printing company called the Book Printing Company Shirkat-i-Kitab. The Literacy Corps 1969–1979. The Literacy Corps took place over the White Revolution, which occurred under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. It was believed by the government that the majority of the population was illiterate, and the Literacy Corps was an attempt to change the statistics. The program included hiring young men who had a degree in secondary education to serve in the Literacy Corps, and involved teaching children between the ages of 6 and 12, most of whom had not attended second-grade education, to read. The goal was to improve literacy in Iran in a cheap and efficient manner, which they also believed would improve workmanship. 200,000 young men and women participated in the literacy corps, teaching 2.2 million boys and girls and over a million adults. In many cases, the volunteers would continue to work as educators after their conscription ended. Post-Islamic Revolution. At first, post-1979, Islamic Revolution placed heavy emphasis on educational reforms. Politicians wanted Islamic values to be present within the schooling system as quickly as possible. However, pressures due to the Iran-Iraq War and economic disparities forced plans for education back as other issues took priority. However, some significant changes were made. First came the Islamization of textbooks. Schools were then segregated according to the sex of students. Observation of Islamic law in schools became mandatory, and religious ceremonies were maintained. By the 1990s, more significant changes arose. The annual academic system switched to a system based on credits. For example, if a student were to fail a class, rather than repeating the whole year, they would simply retake the credits. The mandatory duration of high school was shortened from 4 years to 3, however. The fourth year was still available as an option to bridge the gap between high school and university. Also, many technical and vocational programs were added to help train students for the workforce, which proved to be popular with students. Modern education. The first Western-style public schools were established by Haji Mirza Hassan Rashdi. Amir Kabir, the Grand Minister, helped the first modern Iranian college establish in the mid-19th century, and the first Iranian university modeled after European universities established during the First Pahlavi period. There are both free public schools and private schools in Iran at all levels, from elementary school through university. Education in Iran is highly centralized. The Ministry of Education is in charge of educational planning, financing, administration, curriculum, and textbook development. Teacher training, grading, and examinations are also the responsibility of the ministry. At the university level, however, every student attending public schools is required to commit to serve the government for a number of years, typically equivalent to those spent at the university, or pay it off for a very low price, typically a few $100s, or completely free if one can prove inability to pay to the Islamic government post-secondary and university. During the early 1970s, efforts were made to improve the educational system by updating school curriculum, introducing modern textbooks, and training more efficient teachers. The 1979 revolution continued the country's emphasis on education, with the new government putting its own stamp on the process. The most important change was the Islamization of the education system. All students were segregated by sex. In 1980, the Cultural Revolution Committee was formed to oversee the institution of Islamic values in education. An arm of the committee, the Center for Textbooks, composed mainly of clerics, produced 3,000 new college-level textbooks reflecting Islamic views by 1983. Teaching materials based on Islam were introduced into the primary grades within 6 months of the revolution. Grades. Budget. Each year, 20% of government spending and 5% of GDP goes to education, a higher rate than most other developing countries. 50% of education spending is devoted to secondary education, and 21% of the annual state education budget is devoted to the provision of tertiary education. Education reform. The fourth five-year development plan 2005-2010 has envisaged upgrading the quality of the educational system at all levels, as well as reforming education curricula and developing appropriate programs of vocational training, a continuation of the trend towards labor market-oriented education and training. With the new education reform plan in 2012, the pre-university year will be replaced with an additional year in elementary school. Students will have the same teacher for the first 3 years of primary school. Emphasis will be made on research, knowledge production, and questioning instead of math and memorizing alone. In the new system, the teacher will no longer be the only instructor, but a facilitator and guide. Other more general goals of the education reform are making the education more global in terms of knowledge, nurturing children who believe in the one God, providing a socially just education system, increasing the role of the family in the education system, increasing the efficiency of the education system, achieving the highest standard of education in the region. Teacher education. Farhangian University is the University of Teacher Education and Human Resource Development in Ministry of Education. Teacher training centers in Iran are responsible for training teachers for primary, orientation cycle, and gifted children's schools. These centers offer 4-year programs leading to a BA or BS degree in teaching the relevant subject. Students that enter teacher training centers have at minimum completed a high school diploma. A national entrance examination is required for admission. There are 98 teacher training centers in Iran, all belonging to Farhangian University. Teacher education in Iran has been considered more centralized than other Western countries, such as Great Britain. Foreign languages. Persian is officially the national language of Iran. Arabic, as the language of Quran, is taught grades 7-12. In addition to Arabic, students are required to take one foreign language class in grades 7-12. Although German and French are offered in some schools and textbooks have been written, English continues to be the most desired language. Kanoun-e-Zaban-e Iran, or Iran's Language Institute, affiliated to Center for Intellectual Development of Children and Young Adults, was founded in 1979. Persian, English, French, Spanish, German, Russian, and Arabic are taught to over 175,000 students during each term. English language is studied in first and second high school. However, the quality of English education in schools is not satisfactory, and most of students, in order to obtain a better English fluency and proficiency, have to take English courses in private institutes. Before 2018, some primary schools also taught English. However, in January 2018, a senior educational official announced that teaching English is banned in primary schools, including non-government primary schools. Presently, there are over 5,000 foreign language schools in the country, 200 of which are situated in Tehran. A few television channels air weekly English and Arabic language sessions, particularly for university candidates who are preparing for the annual entrance test. Internet and distance education. Full internet service is available in all major cities, and it is very rapidly increasing. Many small towns and even some villages now have full internet access. The government aims to provide 10% of government and commercial services via the internet by N-2008 and to equip every school with computers and connections by the same date. Payne-Noor University, established 1987 as a provider exclusively of distance education courses, is a state university under the supervision of the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology. As of 2020, 70% of Iranian schools linked to the local intranet. Higher education. As of 2013, 4.5 million students are enrolled in universities out of a total population of 75 million. Iranian universities graduate almost 750,000 annually. The tradition of university education in Iran goes back to the early centuries of Islam. By the 20th century, however, the system had become antiquated and was remodeled along French lines. The country's 16 universities were closed after the 1979 revolution and were then reopened gradually between 1982 and 1983 under Islamic supervision. While the universities were closed, the Cultural Revolution Committee investigated professors and teachers and dismissed those who were believers in Marxism, liberalism, and other imperialistic ideologies. The universities reopened with Islamic curricula. In 1997, all higher-level institutions had 40,477 teachers and enrolled 579,070 students. Admission to public universities, Some are tuition-free, is based solely on performance on the nationwide Konkur exam. Some alternative to the public universities is the Islamic as a university which charges high fees. The syllabus of all the universities in Iran is decided by a national council. As a result, the difference of the quality of education among the universities is only based on the location and the quality of the students and the fac. Among all top universities in the country, the University of Tehran, founded in 1934, has 10 faculties, including a Department of Islamic Theology. It is the oldest in the modern system and biggest university in Iran. It has been the birthplace of several social and political movements. Tarbiyat Madir's University means professor training university, also located in Tehran, is the only exclusively postgraduate institute in Iran. It only offers master's, PhD, and postdoc programs. It is also the most comprehensive Iranian university in the sense that it is the only university under the Iranian Ministry of Science system that has a medical school. All other medical schools in Iran are a separate university and governed under the Ministry of Health. For example, Tehran University of Medical Sciences, commonly known as Medical School of Tehran University, is in fact separate from Tehran University. Sharif University of Technology, Amir Kabir University of Technology, and Iran University of Science and Technology, also located in Tehran, are nationally well known for taking in the top undergraduate engineering and science students and internationally recognized for training competent undergraduate students. It has probably the highest percentage of graduates who seek higher education abroad. KN2C University of Technology is among most prestigious universities in Tehran. Other major universities are at Shiraz, Tabriz, Isfahan, Mashhad, Avaz, Kermanshah, Dabestân, Rasht, and Urumiyeh. There are about 50 colleges and 40 technological institutes. In 2009, 33.7% of all those in the 18-25 age group were enrolled in one of the 92 universities, 512 paying Noor University branches, and 56 research and technology institutes around the country. There are currently some 3.0 million university students in Iran, and 1.0 million study at the 500 branches of Islamic as a university. Iran had 1 million medical students in 2011. Entrepreneurship. In recent decades, Iran has shown an increasing interest in various entrepreneurship fields in higher educational settings, policy making, and business. Although primary and secondary school textbooks do not address entrepreneurship, several universities, including Tehran University and Sharif University, offer courses on entrepreneurship to undergraduate and graduate students. In accordance with the third five-year development plan, the Entrepreneurship Development Plan in Iranian universities, known as CARID Plan, was developed and launched in 12 universities across the country under the supervision of Management and Planning Organization and the Ministry of Science, Research and Technology. Women in education. In September 2012, women made up more than 60% of all universities' student body in Iran. This high level of achievement and involvement in higher education is a recent development of the past decades. The right to a respectable education has been a major demand of the Iranian women's movement starting in the early 20th century. Before the 1979 revolution, a limited number of women went to male-dominated schools, and most traditional families did not send their girls to school because the teachers were men or the school was not Islamic. During the 1990s, women's enrollment in educational institutions began to increase. The establishment and the expansion of private universities Dabestân and Islami also contributed to the increasing enrollment for both women and men. Under the presidency of Rafsanjani and the High Council of Cultural Revolution, the Women's Social and Cultural Council was set up and charged with studying the legal, social, and economic problems of women. The council, with the support of Islamic feminists, worked to lift all restrictions on women entering any fields of study in 1993. After the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and his new regime prioritized the Islamization of the Iranian education system for both women and men. When Khomeini died in 1989, under President Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, many but not all restrictions on women's education were lifted, albeit with controversy. The right to education for everyone without discrimination is explicitly guaranteed under Iran's constitution and international documents, which Iran has accepted or to which it is a party. Some scholars believe that women have poor access to higher education because of certain policies and the oppression of women's right in Iran's strictly Islamic society. However, Iranian women do have fair access to higher education as seen by a significant increase in female enrollment and graduation rates as women university students now outnumber males. Iranian women emerge to more prominent positions in the labor force and demonstrate the presence and confidence of professional women in the public sphere. The opportunities for women's education and their involvement in higher education has grown exponentially after the Iranian Revolution. According to UNESCO World Survey, Iran has the highest female-to-male ratio at primary level of enrollment in the world among sovereign nations, with a girl-to-boy ratio of 1.22:1. Schools for Gifted Children. The National Organization for Development of Exceptional Talents. These schools were shut down for a few years after the revolution, but later reopened. Admittance is based on an entrance examination and is very competitive. Their tuition is similar to private schools but may be partially or fully waived depending on the student's financial condition. Some Naudet alumni are world-leading scientists. Other schools are selective schools which are called Namun Dalati. These schools are controlled by the government and have no fees. Students take this entrance exam alongside with Naudet exams. Organization for Educational Research and Planning OERP. OERP is a government-affiliated, scientific, learning organization. It has qualitative and knowledge-based curricula consistent with the scientific and research findings, technological, national identity, Islamic and cultural values. OERP's responsibilities: 1. To research on the content of the educational. 2. To study and develop simple methods for examinations and educational assessments. 3. To write, edit, and print textbooks. 4. To identify and provide educational tools and the list of standards for educational tools and equipments. 5. To run pure research on improving the quality and quantity of education. 6. To perform other responsibilities issued by the OERP Council. Prominent high schools in Iran, historical and current: Abu Rayhan High School, Al-Borz High School, Al-Aim Heli High Schools Naudet, Al-Aim Tabatabi High School, Baghirul Olum High School, Danishmand High School, Danish High School, Energy Atomi High School, Farzangan High Schools Naudet, Firuz Baram High School, Hadaf No. 3 High School, Imam Ali High School Naudet, Imam Mousa Sadr High School, Kamal High School, Mirza Kuchak Khan High School Naudet, Mofid No. 1 and No. 2 High School, Nikin High School, Rayar Educational Complex, Razi High School, Salam High Schools, Shahid Beheshti High School, Sohail, Shahid Dasgabe High School Naudet, Shahid Ijay High School Naudet, Shahid Sultani School Naudet, Shahid Sales School Exemplary School. International Baccalaureate Schools. Iran has 3 international baccalaureate IB schools. They are Mayor-e Taban International School, Shahid Madavi International School, and Tehran International School. Mayor-e Taban International School is an authorized IB World School in Shiraz offering the primary years program, middle years program, and diploma program. Shahid Madavi School is an IB World School in Tehran offering the primary years program and middle years program. Tehran International School is an IB World School in Tehran offering the diploma program. Statistics. Iran produces the third highest number of engineers in the world. Around 70% of engineering graduates are women. As of 2016, Iran has the fifth highest number of STEM graduates worldwide with 335,000 annual graduates. In 2010, 64% of the country's population was under the age of 30. There are approximately 92,500 public educational institutions at all levels, with a total enrollment of approximately 17,488,000 students. According to 2008 estimates, 89.3% of males and 80.7% of females over the age of 15 are literate. Thus, 85% of the population is literate. Virtually all children of the relevant age group enrolled into primary schools in 2008, while enrollment into secondary schools increased from 66% in 1995 to 80% in 2008. As a result, youth literacy rates increased from 86% to 94% over the same period, rising significantly for girls. A literacy corps was established in 1963 to send educated conscripts to villages. During its first 10 years, the corps helped 2.2 million urban children and 600,000 adults become literate. This corps was replaced with the Literacy Movement Organization after the Islamic Revolution. In 1997, there were 9,238,393 pupils enrolled in 63,101 primary schools, with 298,755 teachers. The student-to-teacher ratio stood at 31:1. In that same year, secondary schools had 8,776,792 students and 280,309 teachers. The pupil-teacher ratio at the primary level was 26:1 in 1999. In the same year, 83% of primary school-age children were enrolled in school. As of 1999, public expenditure on education was estimated at 4.6% of GDP, not budget. In 2007, the majority of students, 60%, enrolled in Iranian universities were women. According to UNESCO World Survey, Iran has the highest female-to-male ratio at primary level of enrollment in the world among sovereign nations, with a girl-to-boy ratio of 1.22, 1.0. Each year, 20% of government spending and 5% of GDP goes to education, a higher rate than most other developing countries. 50% of education spending is devoted to secondary education, and 21% of the annual state education budget is devoted to the provision of tertiary education.